Thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So this evening, I am delighted to welcome Head of Performance at Feyenoord, Rick Kost. So welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming on. Before we go any further, I want to say a big thank you to Callum Walsh at Huddersfield Town for making this introduction. When Callum says to me, you need to speak to someone, I listen. So it's great to get you on, Rick. Thank you very much for giving up an hour of your evening to have a chat. But anyone that doesn't know who you are, do you want to give us a bit of a background on you, your education, and finishing up with what you're doing right now at Feyenoord?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Rick, and I'm 40 years old with a background in actually multiple Olympic sports before I came into football. And especially I did from Beijing to Rio. I did like the field hockey women and men of the Dutch national team. Luckily we had a lot of success there, and next to that I started off with handball. Also tried to get the ladies in Holland to reach the Olympics in Beijing. Unfortunately didn't work out, but we reached our first European Championship by then, so which was a real big milestone. And in 2016 I actually joined Feyenoord as a head of performance, and try to make a long-term performance, like a performance track where everything came together in the world where we try to combine football tactics, football performance, but also physical performance. And up to now it actually worked pretty well.
Excellent. How much did you take from the hockey world, or how much have you taken from the hockey world into the football world?
A lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
tell me more.
Lot. So we have in Holland we have René Wormhout. He's one of the guys who is doing the Dutch national football team as a performance coach, and he written this book which is called the Athletic Skills Model. Okay. And Geert Savelsberg, who was my teacher in the university while I was doing human movement science, actually said, there is a lot of cross-link in between all these sports and sport types. So if you can find the donor value in one sport and bring it over to the other sport, you actually, you're actually one of the pioneers. You try to bring new stuff in, and that's when I start thinking about, all right, how can I actually cross-link all these field hockey intensity, the way we were training into football. And one of the biggest things we really tried to do was like getting intensity into the game. So what I noticed was in football, everyone was thinking about like volumes. We have to reach 500 high intensity distance meters, or we have to reach about 100 accelerations and 80 decelerations. But it actually sounded pretty strange. So how are we going to do 100 accelerations? And then you have to have your laptop next to the pitch and say, all right, so now we have to stop training because we reached our 100. And that's when what we did at hockey was like try to combine this physical data with the tactical data. So we say if we do 1 minute of intensity of the game, we actually know if we done 10 about how many high intensity distance, how much intensity distance we reached and how many actions. So why don't we just combine a couple of parameters? And that's what I brought into football. So actually build up all the periodization around that model, and worked pretty well.
It's interesting when I hear people coming into football, because over here in England, I think it is changing. It's definitely changing. But up until probably 5, maybe 10 years ago, if you were in football, you got a job in football. There wasn't much crossover from people coming out or non-football people getting into football. And that's changed recently. I had the guys at the FA, Football Association, on, who pretty much all got a background in anything but. So hockey, Ben Rosenblatt with the hockey girls, Martin Evans with the cycling, Bryce Kavanagh with the rugby. So it's really interesting to hear that. But how were these methods accepted by the football guys? Were you having to communicate them in a certain way to make it sound football specific? And that's horrible language from me, but try to paint it in a way that is acceptable for them?
Yeah, definitely. So I knew when I came into football that it would be a struggle. So for the first year, I actually tried to find the terminology which helped me to create everything I knew into a football situation. So for me, like an action in field hockey, you say, we have to do an action. So an action is, for instance, like, let's say, one acceleration all usually means like zero point 0.8 deceleration. So we say, all right, so this one action is one deceleration and one acceleration combined. But in football, that will never work. So if you say, oh, we have to reach one action, so I say, why don't we call like a football action? And a football action is everything we do with or without the ball, but there probably has to be like a change of direction. So they know like, so let's say we do like a turnover. So you lose the ball and we do a turnover. That's like one football action. And I really try to get all the terminology around football things. So for instance, in the gym, we don't do gym sessions or weight training. No, we do football performance. That means, let's say you do extensional, you do snatches or you do something with extension. You say, all right, so this is good for like your jumps for heading or defending a corner. So we had football duel power, so we really try to get all the football terminology, because mobility work is like functional football mobility. So you need to reach, like if your foot goes up to catch a high ball in the air, you need to have like functional football mobility. So not only hip extension, you just need to have. So I really try to get everyone like in contact with what we actually needed to do and need to improve. Because if in the beginning I also make like mistakes, like we have to we have to do high intensity. And then everyone was playing really small-sided games, not just small-sided games, but also in areas which weren't really functional. So that's when I say, all right, but football is not only like being on your front feet and being like turning and rotating. It's like going from small to big, because within a collision, you have to make sure that the ball goes to areas where there's more space. So why don't we make the small-sided games a bit bigger? And it looks more like football. And that's also when I came up with a term like playing in-game games and out-of-game games, which are like in-game is more like conditioning games and out-of-game games are more like tactical games. So I really tried to dig myself into the terminology which made it understandable for all these coaches. Otherwise, I would have been kicked out in 6 months probably.
How did the players react to this change was it a change of terminology, or did they not really have any terminology before? It was just a gym session.
No, yeah, there were some terms. I have to say there wasn't a lot of performance or physical performance at Feyenoord when I arrived, but actually they were pretty okay with it. Didn't seem like it was really strange, As long as you put the word football in the sentence, it actually sounds pretty good. And also it sounded pretty, yeah, like normal. It's we do it for the football stuff, because the thing I also heard from the more old school coaches was, no, we're not an athletic school here. We, if you want to do running, we go, you run a marathon. So that's what he said. All right, so really cool, but guys, it's with football sprints. So it's not only doing sprints, but it's sub-maximal football sprints, and it helps you do turnover after turnover. So it helps you to, when you lose the ball, to actually have have an advantage for being earlier at the opponent goal than if you're not able to do like this repeated sprint stuff. So I think players actually got used to it pretty fast, even faster than all the coaches.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
But it did change a lot.
Yeah, nice. Love that. That's really interesting for people, I think, to change that terminology to get the buy-in from players. So yeah, appreciate that. So
sorry, but
no, go on.
The thing is, being like a performance coach in the first place, you're actually an alien, because all these guys are football trainers, and they say, Rick, or whatever performance trainer you are, is like performance trainer. You're not allowed to speak about football. So that's why everyone gets his UEFA C. Then at least they know, I done something in football. All right, but it's only a ticket. Mm-hmm. But yeah, without your ticket, you're actually pretty much, if you're pretty analytic, you actually see the game usually, no, I won't say better, but at least like the same as a football coach. And even though it's like I've done this small, not really scientific research, but I've done this research for a little program I was working on. And the fun part was like, who is having the most contacts in visual football performance? So how many hours a year is a football coach actually looking at watching football? So yeah, I actually don't know, but let's say like 50 games in all opponent games. So let's say it's like about 300, maybe 400 hours. And then, all right, so how much is like the performance trainer, you know? Well, he's actually looking way more, because he also looks like in depth in more like analytical stuff in how guys are moving around the ball and without the ball. So he goes up to 700. And how much for like a video performance guy? Well, he goes all the way from here to the moon, you know?
Yeah.
He just 24 hours a day. So who is actually having the knowledge about football? And that's when they got more like understanding about what it actually meant to be a performance coach or a video performance guy. And and just have to, every time you have to defend yourself, or not really defending, but explain yourself why someone who is not into football still can have a lot of knowledge about football, but on a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. How important is it, do you think, and this has come up recently through conversations I've had on the podcast, but externally as well, the importance of having formal qualifications, like coaching qualifications? You mentioned there UEFA C. Have you got any coaching qualifications, technical?
No, I don't. No, okay. I do give some courses on the... so I'm not having the ticket myself, but I think having a qualification actually helps a lot. So one of the things I also say to the guys who are working for me at Feyenoord is like, the first thing you have to do when you come into football is get your license. Make sure that you just do it. You know, it's pretty. It's not that difficult, and it's helping you in an analytical way of the knowledge about football. But just get it. You know, it just helps you. And usually also the club wants to help you pay it, so it's also not something you can't overcome on with no financial means. But I think it definitely helps you. And it's also a thing, because being a performance alien and us being performance aliens,
I like that.
It's actually also like all these trainers think that this guy is actually coming in and he's taking over the area. You know, it's like being the big monkey on top of the hill, and this guy climbing up and is doing all this effort, working from 7 till 7, 24 hours a day, or like 7 days a week, and he's actually working harder. You know, so what is he going to do? He's actually eating my pie. So it's also good that you like show them that you want to put effort in the knowledge of football. It's like a bit of both sides. It's not that only the trainer or the coaches have to adapt. We also have to adapt to the situation. Otherwise, you will never be accepted.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Love that. So we're going to have a little chat around periodization. And like I said to you just before we kicked off, it's come up quite a lot in terms of the structure of the week, how things are pieced together, especially in big clubs like Feyenoord, who have got multiple games a week, potential European competition, etc., etc. From a I suppose a bird's eye view of your week and how it's set up in a 1 game week versus 2 game week, I'd be really interested to get your perspective. And then when we've got that, we can dive into little areas of that week to get a bit more detail. Is that all right?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Definitely. So I think one of the things which helped me throughout the years is being out of like Olympic situation, is that you, with the field hockey teams, we actually played like 8 or 9 games, depending if you reach the final in like 12 or 13 days. So what I did was like, all right, looking at your most like horrible week or best week, depending on how you will want to call it. So having like a Sunday to Saturday with a Wednesday in between game, you know. So that means you have 3 games a week. So we call that the worst case scenario. So if you know that you have to do this 90 minutes per week, then you also know what the end result of your periodization will have to do, will have to reach. So coming back to counting the minutes of high intensity means that you can count back also how many weeks of preseason you need to reach the amount of worst case minutes. So that's actually the base of how we started it. And the starting point always is pretty difficult, but everyone knows that you can probably train like 4 times a week or maybe 5 times a week, playing a test match and doing 2 times 5 minutes 6v6. That's nothing serious. And then on the volume base, you actually look, all right, so what's the volume of this worst case week? And we learned about all competition years before. So really try to build it up, try to create fixed weeks, try to create standard weeks, but also try to create worst case scenario weeks. And build from scratch actually all the way up to worst case scenario, adding 10, 12, 15%. And it's actually nothing different than a lot of like pioneers like Tim Gabbett before me did stuff. But the only thing we really try to add is like really knowing what it means to reach the worst case scenario. And if you know the worst case scenario, you can like chunk it up to the beginning, and knowing what every exercise means also means, all right, so now today we have to reach 10 in-game minutes, and next week on a Tuesday we need 15, and the week after we need 20, and the week after, the 4th week is always like, we call it like an adaptation week, so you have to get used, because you can't climb every week, otherwise the sky would be the limit, but unfortunately that's not the case. So the 4th week is like a similar week as week 3, and then you build on. And then you use test matches and like twice a week, maybe 3 times a week to build towards your worst case scenario. So I think that's like I don't know how you call it in English, but we say the geraamte, so the skeleton of the red line of the periodization is really try to reach your worst case scenario.
So how would that then get interrupted when you've got a cup you get through a competition and you get into the next round? That potentially interrupts that. How do you then change that to factor in the game?
Yeah, but it you can say like it interrupts, but it can also help you. So one of the things in Holland which helped with like the 5 changes. So we had 5 guys we could interchange.
Yes,
so
instead of 3.
Instead of 3.
Okay.
So that actually helped us a lot. So we can say, all right, so now your worst case scenario, so your level is say playing 90, playing 60, playing 90. And you got like your trainings in between. So let's say week 1 you play 90, 60, 90, and the next week we go to 90, 75, 90, and then you go to 90, 90, 90. But then again, we also know that roughly said, also depend on per player, of course, and position. But let's say roughly said, if you played like 6 games in 2 weeks, 90, 90, 90, there will be a moment that your player is just not of value anymore. His performance will go like to 95, maybe 90%. You see that he declines in his level, like his power output during the game. First of all, like in the last 15 minutes, you see that he drops. And the next game, you see, the last 30 minutes, and in the next game, 45 minutes. So it's pretty, like, it helps if you have a coach who can listen to you and say, all right, so let's try to do something smart with subs. So in the build-up towards your worst-case scenario, try to get your best players to play 90, maybe 30, and then 90 again. But your team has to be good enough to keep the 0 or maybe a 1-0 advantage up to 60 minutes. And then the best guys are coming in, or maybe a good striker is coming in. And he has loads of advantage because the team already played 60 minutes where you have to play against. So the level of your opponent will be lower in the last 30. So put in a striker. So or the best striker you have, for instance. So he plays like you can actually pick games where you really need your best players to be in 90 minutes, of course. But you can also pick games where you have like your second choice playing 60 minutes and your first choice is playing 30. It helps him get through the week better and also through the year better. But it also helps your team because you want to have power output on the most important moments of the game, which is usually like the last 10 minutes of the first half and the last 15 of the second half.
How do you model that, Rick? And how is that influenced by previous results? So if you're if you're planning to have your best striker only doing 30 minutes on the Wednesday, but you lose heavily on the Saturday, how much of an influence does that have on it? I suppose, like we spoke about at the start before we were on air, you've got to have a strong character and a strong philosophy to say, we're moving on, we've planned this is still going to happen, rather than be dictated by results. And that's often not a performance thing, that's a head coach thing. Yeah.
Definitely is. Yeah, the only thing we can do is like give advice. But then again, you don't have to sub 4 guys.
Yeah.
You know, within the hockey, within the field hockey, we actually noticed that if you change 1 guy, it doesn't affect the team. Mm-hmm. If you change 2 guys, it still doesn't affect the team. But if you train 3 guys, it completely affects the team. So the characteristics of playing the game with 8 similar guys is almost the same as with 10 which you have the last game. So it's more like an emotional thing that you actually want to have the best 11 every game on the field, but it doesn't help you because these guys you're pulling the fuel is dropping from game to game if they reach this point when they get tired or they get injured. So why not just sub 1 or 2 guys and get them in later on in the game? It actually helps you create a better performance at the end of the game. So the basics from this idea came from when we went to the Olympics in London. Like of course you have like a 4-year period where you work towards this Olympic tournament. But I think 2 years before we said, all right, so every game we're just going to sub everyone, like up and forth. So we try to find the best combinations, guys who were finding each other better, or guys who were actually scoring goals together. So we make these couples or threesomes in the game, and we say, all right, these guys have to go in as much as possible. Of course, hockey is an interchange sport, so it's not really a one-on-one example, but the idea came from that we noticed that the guys who actually were less good in the beginning, at the end we actually had difficulty in choosing what we actually want from them. So the right back, who is not so fast but has a great pass, came in where we needed a great passer. And then the next game we said, all right, so now we have like a really fast opponent on that position. They want to play like back on back. So make sure that we have a fast guy there. So that's not the best passer who came in, but it was like the guy who has the best runs, the fastest runs. And that's when you notice that you got more like this specificity per player. And it wasn't about, the best player has to be in. It was more like, he has this capability, so we can use him in this game because we need that part of him. And that's actually the basics from this idea. And when I came into football, of course, everyone said, football is not hockey. And of course, I understand football is not hockey. But the idea stays. If your opponent is more tired and your best player comes in, time and space for him are like an advantage because the defenders of the opponent obviously are more tired. And then it comes to personality and making sure that you have it, that you periodize it really good and choose the right games for it to start with. So we start with the bottom 5, So all right, so now we're playing one of the bottom 5, which probably means that we have a big chance of winning this one. So let's make sure that our best mid guy is not on the pitch for the first 60, and we just brought in the last 30 minutes. And it actually, so now the game's actually speeding up at the end of the play instead of everyone's running, get a running game. So everyone is trying to we call it like make the play dead.
Okay.
So
slow it down.
So yeah, we're 1-0 up, but now we said, all right, so we have more than enough energy. So we have a lot of subs. We have 5 subs, and we have our best players on the pitch. So there came more confidence in the coaches' idea about how to use them. And of course, if we played PSV or Ajax, the best 11 are on the pitch. I understand, of course. And you try to get your best 11 day in or play out on the pitch always. But it's just not with the schedule we had last year. I think we had like 4 windows where we played 9 games in 3 weeks,
right.
And then we had 1 game, and then again 9 games. So there was no time for breathing, and you have to travel all the way to Moscow. You have to travel to Kiev, So there was no time to breathe out or in. So why not use our best players for the best games, and the best players in the last section of the game against, for instance, the bottom 5.
How are you? So, in the terms of making the decisions on these players, is it a subjective thing? Are you using objective measures to decide whether these do actually need to have the half an hour, or whether they can go again?
Yeah, no. Usually it is. It's objective. So we have all these volumes per week, of course, but we also have the questionnaires. We try to make it as objective as possible. So if we saw a change in like fatigue or sleeping rhythms, or we saw that the level of high intensity distance and actions and repeated sprints during the game dropped a bit. So for 1 game it can be coincidence, of course, maybe 2 games also. But then we thought, why not start if someone drops already like 2 games, why not say to the coach, it might be good to just sub him first or bring him later on in the game. So really try to make it as good as possible, and the intensity minutes actually help us, because we chunk every game into quarters, like 15 minutes, and we say, all right, so what is the relative amount of minutes you reach every 15 minutes? So all right, so now if we play a good game, we play let's say PSV, and we are all in the game. The first will usually is like 12 or 13 minutes you reach in game zone. The second 15 minutes you drop a bit, and the last usually goes up a bit. And then the second half you usually see, all right, so we start off pretty good again, like 12, 13 minutes out of 15. And then all of a sudden, if you see there is some fatigue in a player, it just drops significantly. And sometimes the last 15, they only reach 5 or 6 minutes, because the level of the game drops, or the opponent does something different, or there's change of tactics. But if it happens 2 games in a row, usually it's not about tactics anymore. It's more or less like, all right, so plus the questionnaire, plus a drop in amount of game intensity minutes they actually reach, we advise, might be good to let him play for 30 minutes or maybe 45 minutes or whatever you want. But take into consideration that his performance on the pitch is a bit off right now. And I totally admit, it's also a bit subjective, because it might be something I have in mind, or something it might be wishful thinking, but somehow freshness of players drops when they play more games. And I think having someone like hungry for the ball, keeping them hungry for the ball, even if they don't start the game. And of course you have to be smart, all these players have these extreme personalities sometimes. But if you have a chat with a guy, say, all right, it's better for you, and it's not that you're out of the team, it's more or less that you're helping the team try to improve the performance at the end when everyone's tired and you're actually fresh. So it's all about managing perspective, managing ideas. But I definitely believe in the fact that you can use players on certain periods where they actually function like their function is best.
Mm-hmm. It was something that I spoke to Callum about, and clearly you had these conversations had a big impact on how they did certain things last season, I think it was. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and the nice thing about Callum was actually that they actually tried it.
Yeah,
but they did it quite big with 3 subs.
They were big with it.
Yeah. So everyone, I think I read something about this game that everyone said, how can they actually change the starting list like this? They must be crazy. And then all of a sudden they win in the last 2 minutes or 3 minutes of the game. I think it was like the 1-0 actually.
Yeah, I think it was one of the games that
Bolton, I don't know.
they had to, I think they had to win. It was like back end of the season,
Exactly.
relegation. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
it was a big win for them also.
yeah.
So, and I think 3 subs, that's also bringing it to the limit, of course. But I love, like, if coaches are actually open for this kind of conversations, of course.
Mm.
And but it's also being smart and having confidence and the coach has to have confidence in you as a head of performance, that they actually want to listen and actually use it to in their advantage.
I'd like to have a little chat around the strength and power, or football strength, or however you call, whatever you want to call it, and where this fits in this kind of conversation, and how volume and intensity, based on what you've said, how intensity varies across the week, across different weeks, for those key players that you want in and around the team, for the players that maybe not so key versus the all the rest of the guys. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out with what you've just said.
Yeah, so obviously we have like individual programs because if you're playing 3 games a week, it will be quite tough to have a power session. But what we try to do is what I try to build in is that we have gym sessions every day.
Okay.
So and it sounds pretty rough, It's like, wow, how can you do a gym
Radical.
session? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But like a gym session is not always like the gym session. It's not CrossFit, You're not going to the limit. It's also working on specific areas, doing upper body work, doing more core work, maybe doing some more enlining stuff, that you have
Yep.
to be or outlined or inlined. I don't know how you call it in English, but
Yeah.
so we definitely, in the beginning of the season, of course, has more time and space to do more power work. But I think one of the things we definitely try to get in on like structural way is doing like power ups before training.
Okay.
So
Explain
there,
more.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
more like having it's pretty like heavy stuff, but it's more like 3 repetitions with
Yep.
a lot of rest, and that actually helps us first to power up, to load the muscles before you do sprint work and stuff. But one of the things which is definitely which is yeah, like on top of my list is that it may never influence the football session. So in the beginning, when we started these power ups, sometimes guys were complaining, "Oh, my feet feel so light, I just don't have any feeling anymore. So how can I sprint today?"
Mhm.
But luckily, it was preseason, so we could actually tune it a bit more into the right direction. So we found out that if you do like 3 repetitions and then build it up to 4 repetitions, you adapt, to these sessions. So instead of doing like heavy stuff after training, we did these power ups, and it actually helped them getting more resilient. But it also gave the idea that it wasn't a gym session like a gym session, and making really small steps. And of course, you want to make bigger steps. Usually, you want to make like, all right, I want to make this leap. I want to go from like a squat maybe up to 140 kg, but in 4 weeks. But that's not my aim. My aim is to have more resilient players. So sometimes they're like 74 kilos, but still they have like enough power and enough, like more than enough resilience to make sure that they don't break or they don't tip over. So the idea about having gym sessions every day is try to make more resilient players actually. And of course, when we have this window of guys who need to have more strength training, like the subs, for instance, we of course do more like strength and speed work. But I think the idea about our gym sessions is that it may never influence the football training, but we definitely need to make sure that we use these power ups to get more resilient. Because you need to have pull and tears, tear and pull in your muscles to strengthen them, of course. But
What exercises will be involved in these power ups?
yeah,
Power up sessions, Rick.
yeah, we have loads of functional exercises actually. Like jumping lunges
Okay.
or weighted lunges. But we also have like jumps and with weight vests for instance. But also Olympic numbers, starting off with light snatches or light pulls, maybe do some pull-ups. But it depends. Usually it's like I make these 5-ring type. Is not the 5-ring model because that's I would have stolen that one from someone else. But it's more or less we have these 5 rings. One is speed, one is explosivity, one is max power, one is flexibility, and one is coordination. So we periodize these over time. So let's say this week, for instance, we are in a high power week, which means that we have like more heavy exercises. And for instance, now we did like these cross jumps with weight vests, and we had squats, back squats, and we did some hip locks with wall support.
Okay.
But all with like 60% of your body weight or about 4 times 3 reps. So next week we have another one. So we usually have like 3-week periods, and then the week after we do like the high power goes to the after training session, and we just keep the level there. So we don't really rise the amount of kgs, but we just keep the level there, and we go up to speed work before in the sessions as the main character of the gym session. So everything comes together in one session, but we make sure that one of the circles is bigger that week or that period of 3 weeks. Does that make sense?
No, it makes complete sense. So then the 3x4, so the players do their thing, get into the building, do their thing, then they come into the gym, doing the power-up session, not gym session.
Exactly.
Power-up session, then straight out onto the field.
Yeah, so we have it's 30 minutes before the game, before training. So usually we train at 11 o'clock. So 10:30 we start off with our pre-activation, which is this week like power-up sessions, and we have like 2 of these power-up sessions, and then we have more flexibility. We have recovery session, of course. We have a game preparation session, which is not a power-up, but which is more like functional exercises with jumping, single leg hops, etc. So it takes about 20-25 minutes. Guys go to their booths and then go out and go straight into the field warm-up. And it actually helps me because you have this pre-warm-up, and the muscles are pretty much they're already ready for a good session. So our warm-up is actually more like a coordination work. So today we had this agility track, for instance, which means we do the standard warm-up with our bounces and with our hip locks and with the functional stretching, and we use straight into like one of these functional methods. So we have a lot of change of directions, but it's all because I have like 25 minutes in the warm-up. So a warm-up is usually not just a standard warm-up, but a warm-up is actually a warm-up plus. So it actually helps us being better in change of directions, in jumping, in speed work. So we have high speed work, etc., etc. Really try to periodize that over time. And every week one of these elements is on top of the list, and all the other elements are just coming, being touched on.
What was the integration of the Olympic lifting and the derivatives like? 'Cause especially over here, it's not. I mean, people do use it, but it's kind of a little bit. Ooh, am I an Olympic lifting guy? Am I not? Is it too hard? Is it? Should I be doing this?
Yeah.
What was it like? What was it like over there with them?
Yeah. Well, the thing was, when I came in at Feyenoord, no one actually knew what a barbell was. So
when was this, Rick? How long ago was this?
2016. So
Okay.
it's roughly 4 or 5 years, 4.5 years, I reckon. 5 years actually. So first of all, it's more like a technique thing.
Yep.
One of the things which I found really irritating that having a gym culture or creating a gym culture also means that you have to know the basics of gym. It's pretty strange that one of our guys, let's say, goes to another club and they ask him to do a proper squat and he's not able to do a squat. So it's just part of your education of being a football player at the highest level. So you need to have a proper squat, you need to have a proper snatch, but but it's not about the weights, it's more about the technique. And what I really found great about these Olympic numbers, although they're maybe like 10% of our program, is that they do give you this sudden explosivity, you know. It's like pop and you're there. It's like having control about your body. But it's the same with playing handball. So it's just handball is also one of the things we use just to have like a different interpretation of your perception. Where you are, you just see the game different, and it helps you being a better football player. So also these Olympic numbers just help you feel better, get in touch with your body. So it's not about doing a squat with 140 kilos. It's more like doing a proper squat and being explosive up, you know, being good in extension and making a transfer towards like jumping during the corner, or like a long or a short corner, whatever you
no, it makes sense.
Want to transfer it to.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant. I think that'll give the guys who are gym based, who may be listening to this, a little bit of an idea of, like, in 2016, these guys didn't know what a barbell was. So that's super interesting, super interesting.
Definitely.
So just coming to the small sided games, Rick. I know we've mentioned it a couple of times, but we had a little chat again beforehand around your focus on intensity more than volume, and you've mentioned that right at the start as well. But I'd be interested to see the benchmarks that you use for small sided games and linking the physical with the technical and tactical. That'd be really interesting to hear from you, if that's all right.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things which is, I think it's been there for ages, that everyone says you have to train the game. You know, so it's like everyone in every sport says, training the game, whether it's Michael Jordan or it's whoever is saying it, you know. So everyone wants to train the game. So what annoyed me was that what then actually is the game. I didn't actually know what the game was. So the only thing I knew was like in a tactical way, you know, we play at Feyenoord, we play 4-3-3, and we play with a 6 and not with a 10. So we have a defensive midfielder instead of an offensive midfielder. So, you know, but what then is the game? I couldn't find any numbers about the game. The only thing I knew is like, all right, we run about 11, maybe 12 kilometers a game. All right, so really nice, but I can go here outside, just walk 3 hours. I've done 12 kilometers also. You know, it doesn't say anything. Yeah, we reach about 1,200 meters above HID, so HID, so high intensity distance. 1,200. Oh, nice, but yeah, so what are we going to do now? We're just letting guys run up and forth, and that's the game? No, that's not the game. So what we did, I wanted to make sure that the backbone of our training would be the game. And that's either like small-sided games or big-sided games. You know, you don't want to play a 6 against 6 every week or every day. So you want to have a lot of difference in your small-sided game. So first of all, what we did, really simple actually, but it took us a lot of time, was going for a 3 against 3 all the way up to a 10v10 plus 2 keepers, which actually is a trainings 11 against 11. And we actually so now my English is actually getting in here. So we try to prove that there are similar parameters in these small-sided games in a relative value to the actual game you play on Sunday. And what we found with a really good regression was that if you play like everything above 5v5, so 6v6, 7v7, 8v8s, 9v9s, and 10v10s, then there were like 5 parameters which actually in a different value to each other, or relation to each other. But they all were relative to the game. We had like this, like 98% correlation, and that was like covered distance. Of course, you know, if you do like 115 or 120 meters per minute, and then you do like an 11 against 11, and you also do 115 meters a minute, there's a relation. You know, so if you do 12 meters per minute above 20 kilometers an hour during the game on Sunday, and you actually play a 7 against 7, and you also do the same, like a 12 or 15, whatever the value may be for your position, meters above 20 kilometers an hour, hey, we got like this link. And if you have like 1.2 repeated sprints, and repeated sprint is like one sprint, above 20 kilometers an hour or 25 kilometers an hour, and like the repeated sprint is within 8 seconds of the first sprint. So if you have this repeated sprint and the count is, let's say, let's make it easy, like 1, and during the game it's also 1, hey, we got a relation. So now we have 5 parameters, which is like percentage of high intensity distance versus total distance. We have actions, which actually, well, that's a bit of like a statistical trick we had to put on there, because we had to add all accelerations and decelerations together, because we found that above 6v6, if you played it, the relation stays roughly about 1 to 0.8, or it went from 1 to 0.85, but it didn't really go to 1.0.7 or 1 to 0.6. So we always had 1 acceleration versus 0.8 decelerations. So these 5 parameters helped us to say, all right, so if we want to play the game or train the game, we have to create benchmarks on these 5 parameters, which actually tell us what the game means in worth of external load. And that's when it became really interesting. So we said, all right, so we don't go to average everything, because one time you have like a 6v6 and you're playing, let's say, 125 meters per minute covered distance. You have 10 meters per minute above 20 kilometers an hour. You have roughly 5 actions per minute, and you do 0.7 repeated sprints, and your high intensity distance to covered distance is like 12%. You'd say, all right, so that's pretty cool, but the next time one of these 5 is off and the other one is on. So we say, all right, so let's see if the combination of these 5, we're looking for the top 3 heaviest of these games we actually ever played, and that became our benchmark. Okay. So we averaged the top 3 of our all 6v6, 7v7, 8v8s, 9v9s, etc., etc. And we found that, all right, so we need to, if we want to improve our game or speeden up the game, actually want to play a faster game, that means we have to reach at least the average of the top 3. And that's what we call like a worst case scenario again. So the idea was called like the worst case scenario. And that's when actually the game really got interested, because we actually had to prove that it also took some effort. And that's when good old heart rate came in. So we knew that the heart rate during the game average was, for instance, let's say about like 85% of your HR max. And that's where we say, all right, so if the combination of external load benchmarks exceeds these levels we put as set as a benchmark, and our heart rate is above 85% of your maximum heart rate, it definitely costs you a lot, and the intensity is high. So now we try to find how are we going to play these small-sided games, on the highest level, and that's when we needed to get out all necessary not football stuff, and we called it like a conditioning game, and it was netto playtime. That meant that the balls were either with the coach playing the ball in, sometimes totally on the different side where the team was, because everyone has to like go towards direction, making sure you play press on the ball side, and then the ball goes out and the ball goes in on the totally other side. So these conditioning games actually had different, like the football stays in there, but there were different rules. Also, there was no throw-in, there were no long corners, there were no free kicks, because if we play that, we call it actually like a tactical game. Mm-hmm. Because it's not really conditioning, because if you put everything in, you only play it for 5 minutes, you got like your netto playing time will be like 3 minutes, you will never be having like this conditioning stuff in your game if you do that. So that's how we use these small and big-sided games, and we started off with like team averages. That was about like 10 years ago in field hockey, and then like the means in football were a lot more than I had in Olympic sports. So we had the time to do some research about it, and we found that every position has its position potential, we call it. So if you want to have a guy coming in from another team, or you buy a guy, you buy a player, and he's not able to deliver the same benchmarks on that position, or he has totally different DNA, you definitely know that he's not going to play the game you actually want him to. So we can use it on totally on all different types of information towards the coach, but also if we are training the game or not. The problem we had was that everything smaller than 6v6 didn't look like the game. So we couldn't use these 5 parameters actually on training the game. So that's why we say, all right, so if we play a 5v5 or a 4v4, we do call it a position, like a conditioning game, but it's position A specific.
Okay.
So that means, so everyone, it takes position where you have to. And it also has to do with the way football is actually situated. Because if you have, let's say you have 4 guys, and you play either in a diamond, or you play in a rectangle, if you have to put pressure, you have to come out of your position. Someone has to get behind you or close down. So you don't have a specific position, because if the ball goes out and you want to put pressure again, it's the right guy who was a midfielder but now becomes like a left defender. So we call that yes, we play those games, and yes, it's conditioning work, but it's more like we say it's position A specific based on football actions. And that's how we make the differences, so that we try to, if we really do a conditioning game based on football, which we try to do every single training for an amount, let's say 7 minutes or 10 minutes, or sometimes on a conditioning day, we do it 30 minutes. We build it up all the way up to 30 minutes. Then the small-sided games are we periodize those separately. And they're more periodized with the positioning game. It's totally, it's like a different type of exercise.
What did you say there, Rick? The netto playing time? What does netto stand for something?
Yeah, it's I think it's gross and net, isn't it?
Oh, net.
Gross,
okay.
Okay.
Net.
I think we say in Holland bruto and netto. So it's
okay,
gross and net. So it's more the ball has to be in play all the time. The problem we actually saw is if you control it with heart rate, you want to have these lines, you want to have these ceilings. And if you have players being in their ceilings all the time, you know that the level is really high, because it costs a lot of effort. They're around their 85% of their maximum heart rate. But if you get these toothed blocks, that means that they're actually resting in between. So if you want to do a conditioning game, you have to make sure that they're in total, they have to move around all the time. So the area, the landscape, should push them in a way that they always have to move around. But if you leave the ball with the keeper, you say, all right, so everyone just walks back or jogs back, But if the coach plays the ball towards the keeper and you say, all right, press on the keeper, that's actually when everyone comes into high speed or into action. Otherwise, you just don't reach the levels. And there's one other thing which is really important next to that. So I also mentioned it before, it's the work to rest ratio, because you want to have the level of your play in the first block and the level of play in the last block to be almost the same.
Yeah.
We call that the edge of chaos. So if you if you are below the edge of chaos, you actually jump onto your own level, you never make the step. But if you go too fast or too hard, your heart rate gets you don't recover well enough. So having a lot of rest actually helps you to get the quality between the first and the last block in the same direction or at the same level. But that doesn't mean that your last block can be a bit off, of course, because you do want to condition them. You do want to make sure that they reach an amount of fatigue. So, but if your second block already is really, is less in quality, and your heart rate rises and your external load drops, that means, all right, there's no use of going on, because you probably get injured players the next day.
With all this said, Rick, and these changes that have been made to the structure and how you train, what's been the result? Have things improved on the pitch? Have you got more robust players, fitter players? What's the result of these changes that you've made?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes we have is that we don't have, we can't find a game where we have a decline in power in the last, or external load in the last 15 minutes.
Okay.
We actually deliver the same the first half as the second half, which doesn't mean that we are playing better football. You know, that's a tough one, because that's also a discussion I have with the coach. So he says, how does it help me to reach better, to get better football players? But the thing we do notice is that we had a window where we had a couple of injuries actually in October. Something went wrong. I don't actually, we did go through the data, of course, but something went wrong, and we had like 3 injured guys. So the team actually changed, but the guys who came in didn't show any decline in level.
Okay.
So we actually we had the same results at the time. So it's really difficult to measure everything. But I think it's definitely more fun in playing games than doing these runs. You know, if you have a guy with a laptop, and I'm the same guy. You know, I'm still there with the laptop, or I'm fortunate enough to have another guy with a laptop next to me. But, looking, all right, so he needs 100 meters more above 25. And then you have to pull guys out after training. So, all right, so now we're doing like 4 sprints of 50 meters. And they say, come on, you know, I don't feel like it. So if you can show all these guys that they actually can reach everything within the game, you know, the sentiment of playing games and the intensity of the games goes up, and it helps you just have better vision, make better choices, because the speed is higher in the game, which doesn't mean that you don't have to play any tactical games, of course. You know, it's just a part of training. But I think we definitely have more resilient guys, and whether it's because we train this way, or we do these football gym sessions, or we have sleeping monitors, or we have questionnaires, I actually don't know. You know, I don't think we as performance people or performance aliens are game changers. Are game changers in itself. But I do think that the head coach or the manager definitely is a game changer. But you can help the manager make choices to have like all players being fit on in the team, and making sure that the first and the last minute look like each other, you know, in a relative way. So I don't think I actually reached a gold Olympic medal because we were training this way, but hopefully it helped 2%. I don't know.
Of course. No, that's great, Rick. I mean, this is just a slightly different episode, but we've kind of based everything, or a lot of the stuff, around what happens on the field. And I'm really pleased that that's the case, because this is where the action happens. It's great to get the perspective from your experience, from coming from hockey and translating that into a football environment. So I really appreciate that. But Rick, if anyone wants to reach out to you and ask any questions about what we've discussed, anything else, everything what's going on at Feyenoord, where's the best place for people to contact you? Are you a social media guy?
Yeah, I'm not a real social, because at Feyenoord, you know, we got a lot of fans. If you have a social media account, you probably get crazy. So, but I think LinkedIn would be a great place for leaving a personal message. And I definitely try to contact everyone. It's pretty busy on my LinkedIn, but definitely try to give everyone a proper answer, or maybe go into some nice discussions. I like to discuss. It also helps me improve my ideas about performance and about football, of course.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to let you get back on with your evening, but really appreciate you giving up an hour of your time. It's been super, super insightful. Plenty of takeaways for people, and look forward to catching up soon.
Yeah, it was all my pleasure, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Really awesome getting the chance to have a chat with you.
Oh, my pleasure, Rick. Thank you very much. Speak soon.
See you.
Bye, mate. Bye-bye.